YouTube channel, and you can see it then. Now, during the event, we're going to do a quick poll as well, as you probably see, and we're going to get your thoughts on clean air together and of the actions that we might all take to improve air quality. And this poll will appear in your chat function or Q&A function, chat function, okay, as well. The other thing I suppose to note really is that we are going to really do our best to answer all your questions, but there may be many questions that's using the Q&A function. That's what we'll use to, that'll be there for you to be able to put a question in, and then during that process, we'll try and get as many questions as we can with the panel. Now, the Clean Air Together is the largest citizen science project of its kind ever undertaken in Ireland, where levels of pollution were measured, and you and all of you made this happen. The aim of the project was to get information on levels of harmful air traffic pollutant, nitrogen dioxide, in the Dublin area. Now, in particular, we were really interested in was the local levels of NO2 in people's immediate vicinity of their home and their businesses and so on. We were hoping initially to get about 1,000 participants from across the city, and we didn't really know what to expect on that when the project started last August, but we were absolutely overwhelmed with the level of public interest in it. And the project was oversubscribed. We had another 1,000, even up to 1,500 applicants who unfortunately could not be accommodated due to limitations on the capacity of the laboratory who were analysing these tubes. But we have tried to keep you all together as part of the community of this project, and hopefully some of you that didn't get to measure it here are also here tonight to hear the results. What we see here, I suppose, is a real indication of an appetite and willingness among people in Dublin to engage in citizen science projects and become more aware of some of the issues around the environmental that are of interest to them. But it also shows people's awareness of the importance of good air quality in their city and a genuine interest in helping people protect the environment. Poor air quality is linked, we've consistently said this, to over 1,400 premature deaths in Ireland each year. So it's a very serious public health issue. And actually earlier this week, Minister Ryan announced a public consultation on a draft clean air strategy for Ireland. And that consultation is open until the 3rd of May. So it's an opportunity again in that forum to have your say. Now, of course, the purpose of this evening and this evening's webinar is to tell you all about the results of the Clean Air Together project, to answer your questions that you may have and to let you know how those results will be used. So as I said, you can submit your questions using the Q&A function, and I really encourage you to do this. Answering the questions is going to be what we're going to try and focus on tonight, but in advance of this, over the next 20 minutes or so, we'll just hear from a couple of speakers. We're going to hear from Andy Fanning, who's the program manager in the EPA, who will tell us what clean air is about and where it's come from. And then we'll also have Sabrina Moore of Antashka's Environmental Education Unit, who is the project manager of Clean Air. After that, we'll hold a panel discussion and we'll deal with your questions at that point. The panel will run for about 20 to 30 minutes or so, and we'll answer your questions. And then I expect to wrap up tonight's webinar around or before 8 p.m. So to get us going now, I'm going to hand you over to Andy Fanning of the EPA, who will talk about what Clean Air Together is all about.
Thanks, Micheál, and thanks for the introductions. Good evening, all. Andy Fanning is my name. I'm a program manager in EPA with responsibility for citizen science, and I am delighted to be here. Thank you all for taking your time to be here with us tonight. It's been a brilliant project. And again, I'd like to thank Antashka's Environmental Education Unit for project managing this and working with ourselves so closely to deliver. I'm going to show you a presentation, and it's going to be no more than 10 minutes. If I run over, I'm sure somebody will give out to me. But as Micheál was saying, any questions that come up, please put them into the Q&A function and participate as best you can in this, because it's a celebration tonight of the work that you've done over the last number of months. So get myself started and working away here. I'm going to try and share my screen and get this presentation up and running. So here we go. Hopefully that's going to work. And hit the share button if the smart man that I am. Now, folks, here we go. So to get this party started, here we go. Clean Air Together. Today being the 10th of March, again, as I said, Antashka, ourselves, and the project is a collaboration between the two organizations. But it's not just us. It's about the citizen scientists. And as you all know, citizen scientists are people who volunteer to collect data. They observe and record information about our natural world. And we recognize that there's lots of citizen science projects out there measuring variety of parameters out there and providing very valuable scientific information. But this is the largest one dealing with air quality that has been run in the state thus far. So thank you for participating and being a citizen scientist. From an EPA perspective, I suppose what we're looking at is, why does it work for the EPA? Because it does help us in the goals that we have for having clean air, clean water, and promoting good sustainable behaviors so that we all live in a world that we can hand on to the next generation. It also gives us a great opportunity to work with yourselves, to engage with you and raise your awareness, but also the awareness of the people that live in your families and in your neighborhoods about environmental protection and the need for us all to protect and cherish our environment. The data itself is, of course, valuable, and we can use it for research. It can inform policy, but it can also be used by you to make your views heard. And I know Micheál mentioned something about consultations earlier on. And in doing so, we work with the National Biodiversity Data Centre and An Taisce's Environmental Education Unit to kind of provide these projects to yourselves and to others. So to talk about Clean Air Together, well, Clean Air Together is something that we've been working with An Taisce over a long period of time to bring to this happy day. We've engaged with you and over 1,000 other citizen scientists to record the nitrogen dioxide levels. And we did this through October and November, as you're well aware. So we invited you to participate, and Micheál said there were so many that we weren't able to have everybody participate in doing the measurements, but we're delighted to have some of those people who couldn't be participating in that end of the project here tonight. The measurements were done and the results are out. I'll leave it to Sabrina to do the big reveal in a few minutes' time. What I have to say is we had a huge response. And we're delighted about the amount of awareness that you've raised about the issues of air quality. The amount of social media posts when you put up your tubes, when you took down your tubes, has really raised everybody's awareness of how important it is to manage and think about our air quality and take action in relation to it. But why would we need to do that? We have airquality.ie, which is the EPA website, which provides real-time measurement of air quality on an hourly basis. You can go in there and check on the sites close to yourself and get a fantastic variety of information. But the reason that we needed to engage yourselves is we only have a small number of fixed monitoring sites. We have quite a number in Dublin, but we're never going to have that full coverage that we can achieve by working with yourselves. So Clean Air Together has now created data for many areas where EPA is unable to monitor, and even the City Council would be unable to monitor. So what we've gotten from this work that you've done with ourselves is we've got data that we can use within EPA to help us to do our modeling work. It will also help us when we end up doing some air quality forecasting into the future, and help us to provide back to yourselves and to your neighbours what the air quality will be like over the next couple of days. It can be used by our Dublin City Council colleagues and by the other county councils and city council participants to inform their actions to improve air quality, and you'll be hearing more about that as time goes by. And it can be used by yourselves, of course. It's your data as well as our own. Now, in relation to air quality in Dublin, Micheál mentioned the consultations, but I have to also recognise that the Dublin City Council and their colleagues in South Dublin, Fingal, and the other one that I'm not remembering, Dún Laoghaire, have put together the Dublin Region Air Quality Plan, and that sets out some actions and measures that are going to be taken. And again, it does mention the work that you've done and recognises the value of engaging with citizens. So there will be more opportunity, I'm sure, for you to engage with those authorities into the future as they start to implement that plan. As Micheál also mentioned today, there's been the new Clean Air Strategy for Ireland has been published, and it's a great day, a great week. It's amazing that these things have come together as a confluence between the work that you've done, our launch, and this Clean Air Strategy consultation. It is a very interesting document. There's some fantastic, strategic objectives in there, but this is your opportunity to have a say. And because of your involvement in the project, you now have knowledge that you can bring to bear and views that you can bring to bear in relation to that. So just to finish up from my end of things, we really see that your willingness to be involved has shown that citizen science is a great way for us to work, and a great way for us to gather scientific information. You're not the last. You've been the first. You're not the last. We will be moving on to Cork in later this year to rerun a similar sort of project to the one we have here. But we're not going to stop. in relation to Dublin. What we're going to do is look for opportunities to present this data that you've helped us to generate and generated yourselves. But we also say to yourselves, it's your data too. Share it with your friends, share it with your families, make sure people know what you've done so that they can also become more aware of air quality, so that over time we all work to improve it. So to finish up on behalf of the EPA, well done folks, and I'll leave it to Sabrina to show the results. Thank you again. Now,
thank you very much, Andy, and I'm going to hand you over to Sabrina now, Sabrina Moore, who is with the Environmental Education Unit from Tashka, and Sabrina has been long associated with some of the work that we have been doing on citizen science to our GLOW project, and that we work with air quality in schools, and she has led out from the educational units and Tashka, that side of it. She has led the project management of this, so she's going to tell you all about herself and also about the results. Okay.
Thank you, Michal. So I'm just going to share my screen as well. I have a few slides for you. Good evening, everyone. Really nice to be wrapping up this project tonight and having such a good attendance. Thank you for your time. So my name is Sabrina Moore, and I'm the project manager of Clean Air Together. The results of Clean Air Together are now published on our website, cleanairtogether.ie. And my main aim this evening is to give you a sense of what they mean. So 1,000 people across Dublin measured nitrogen dioxide, or NO2, at the same time. So 1,000 people put a small tube outside of their property for 4 weeks in October 2021. Why NO2? So NO2 is a traffic-related air pollutant. It's produced by diesel and petrol engines, especially older diesel engines. And what we have, thanks to your participation now, is a snapshot of what NO2 levels were in October 2021. So what I would like to bring your attention to is the scale that you see on the right-hand side. You can see different colors, and if we look at the red, it corresponds to elevated levels of NO2. And actually, those values mean that there is a breach of the acceptable level of NO2 per the EU limit. As you can see on the map, no result fell into that category, which is really good news. On the other end of the scale, you can see the dark blue, and that color corresponds to the lowest levels of NO2. And on the map, you can see some locations on the outer suburbs that are dark blue. And of course, moving from dark blue to red, in the in-between, you have an increase of NO2 levels. So I want to give you just a bit more details about the measurements. So the vast majority of the measurements fell into the light blue category, which is the second lowest NO2 level. And usually those were measured at locations in the suburbs and away from major roads. Then 20% of the results were dark blue, so the best level. And these typically were in low density areas. Think of, you see the picture, a rural area in Dublin County, a seaside town with a lot of fresh air, the foothills of the Dublin Mountains, for example. And lastly, we had 14% of the measurements that fell into the orange or yellow category. And those, you could probably see on the map already, they tend to be around the city center, but also by highly trafficked roads. So think of regional roads, national roads, but also the M50. To give you a few examples of roads where NO2 levels were found as elevated, I'm going just to cite a few. There are more than that, but these includes the Malahide Road, Botanic Road, Swords Road, to the south, the Donnybrook Road and the Steel Organ Road. And another road was Kimmage Lower road lower near Harold's Cross. So those would be considered highly trafficked. That's what we mean by highly trafficked. And on this picture, for example, you see Pier Street. So, clearly the first takeaway is that the more traffic there is, the higher the NO2. The second takeaway, which is interesting as well, is the fact that some distance to the curb can have a protective effect. So for example, a front garden can act as a buffer zone, and levels of NO2 won't be as elevated by your front door compared to if you had no front garden. And similarly, if you think in terms of height, living on an upper floor apartment is better than living on a ground floor apartment or lower floor. So this information is interesting when you think about planning. So before I move on, I want to pause the presentation just for a minute. And the reason is that I want to acknowledge that there may be mixed feelings among you, depending on the result that you got. Maybe for some, it was a relief and you're happy about your result. And for other people, it might be less comfortable, either because your result is high or maybe because you have health concerns. And I want to acknowledge that. Now, that being said, air pollution across Dublin matters to all of us, not just at our front door. As we move around and live our lives and work and socialize and shop, we are all exposed to higher levels of NO2. So the good news is that there are plans that are in place, both by the local authorities in Dublin and the government, to improve air quality in the next decade. So you'll probably hear more about this in the Q&A and how we can all support those plans to improve air quality. So I'm going to finish my presentation by talking about health. What does it mean in terms of health? So the World Health Organization, an organization you've heard about a lot during COVID, is an authority in this space as well, in the space of air pollution and health. Just before Clean Air Together Dublin started, at the end of September 2021, the WHO published new guidelines, new recommendations for acceptable NO2 levels. They dramatically decreased the acceptable levels from what you see in the orange, that used to be the level, now down to the dark blue. Now, the WHO knows that this new target is very ambitious and that it's really hard at the moment with the cars that we have to achieve in a lot of cities. So what they suggested was to have interim targets where gradually we're going down and achieving that excellent or much better air quality. So the impact on health. NO2 has a direct impact on health, on everyone's health. So it affects our respiratory system. It can inflame our airways, even in healthy people. But also NO2, once it's in the atmosphere, it transforms into other compounds, and including tiny particles whose health effects are well documented. Everyone is impacted by air pollution, but unfortunately, some people feel the brunt of it more. And those include children and older adults, as well as people with a pre-existing conditions such as asthma, a heart disease, or lung disease. But the bottom line is the science is clear. The lower the NO2, the better for everyone. So just want to recap that if you want to look at results in details, please go to our website, cleanairtogether.ie. You can zoom on the map and really look at all the areas that are of interest to you. And again, on behalf of the whole team, I want to thank you for your contribution and your interest in our project.
And thank you, Sabrina. That was really, really useful, really good. And just to reiterate what Sabrina said, thank you for all your work on this. And it's your measurements, it's what you did, and you have given us all of this information. And we'll talk a little bit more. And I want to have a question for one of our panelists later on about what we're going to do with that information as well. Now, I think now we're going to have a poll, okay? And this poll is, as far as I know, is to come up before we head into the panel. So I'll give them a chance. And while we're getting ready for the panel for discussion, I am there. There's your poll up now. Okay, you have a bit of time to look at it. As we head into the panel discussion, along with Andy and Sabrina, we're also bringing in Tim Collins from the Irish Heart Foundation. And, you know, you just heard that air pollution is such a risk factor in developing cardiovascular disease. And the Heart Foundation has had a particular focus on air pollution. And they're delighted. So we're really delighted to have Tim with us tonight. I've also brought along here tonight Patrick Kenny, who's our EPA, he leads our EPA's air quality team, and Pat oversees the National Ambient Air Quality Monitoring Programme. So this all work involves ourselves, but local authorities and other public bodies throughout the country. And then we're very pleased to have Liam Bergen and Martin Fitzgerald of Dublin City Council. And as Andy said earlier on, in January, 4 Dublin local authorities published their regional air quality plan to improve NO2 levels and air pollutants in the Dublin regions, and Liam and Martin were key to ensuring that this is in place. Okay, so I think, is the poll finished, and are we ready, and are the panelists ready to join me and the questions? Okay. And I might kick off with a question myself, because I think is going. And it's linked to, I link it to another question that's come up in that poll, in that question and answer one there in a little while. Now, maybe one for you, Martin, to kick off with, if you don't mind. The levels you've seen tonight on the NO2 and the nitrogen oxide, how, you know, and just generally that you know about, right? How do these compare with other cities that you're aware, that you know, in Europe and in the UK and in Ireland and so on?
Great, thank you, Micheál, and that's a great question, because I think it's one we always want to know, is how do we compare? So there was a study carried out by the Barcelona Institute for Global Health, which was published in the Lancet back in January in 2021, and they looked at over 800 cities and towns across Europe in 31 different
we seem to
countries. I'm horrified, because I saw that we came out 759 out of 858 cities, but then I realized number one is actually the most polluted city. So we're actually doing very well in terms of nitrogen dioxide compared to a lot of European cities. We're not doing, we could do better, obviously, and we should. And as it turned out, that particular study also looked at the levels of mortality attributable to NO2. And the one city in Ireland that made the top 10 in terms of best cities in terms of lower mortality for NO2 was actually Galway City. So we've a bit of competition here on the island that we've got to that we've got to meet as well. But there is absolutely no room for complacency here. I'm a health professional who works in the area, who works in the local authority area. My absolute focus is in terms of public health. So that's very important. We strive to improve this, and particularly in terms of protecting the more vulnerable members within our community, the very young, the very old. And certainly the health research that we're seeing emerging is very important, particularly in regard to them.
Thanks, Martin, for that. And kind of linked to that question, it's a question that's come up through our Q&A session. And it's from Andrew Hart, who just said he lived abroad from 2008 to 2018 and noticed poor air quality when he returned. So maybe for Pat, has air quality gotten worse? And it's linked to kind of percentage of diesels increased as well, but just has air quality gotten worse in the Dublin region over that period of time or not?
Thank you, Micheál, and that's a really good question. We've been looking at the levels of this pollutant nitrogen dioxide, obviously for a long number of years now, and we've been seeing an increasing trend. And I suppose we're commenting that if those trends continued, that we were likely to breach the EU limit values, which we did. We did in 2019, and definitely a strong contributing, or the main contributing factor to that was both the numbers of vehicles that we have on our roads and that mix of the vehicle fleet and that split between petrol vehicles and diesel vehicles, because we're really aware that diesel vehicles, and it's older diesel vehicles at this stage, but diesel vehicles in general, be they buses or cars or trucks, they are responsible for far more NO2 than petrol vehicles. So as we've seen the fleet growing on our road and that mix in the fleet change, we were concerned at the levels of NO2 that we were seeing. And ultimately, unfortunately, we did have an exceedance of the limit value. Obviously, we then went into very unusual circumstances in the last 2 years where we had, again, a very, very difficult time for the country. But during those lockdowns where we saw vehicle levels fall off on our roads, we saw NO2 levels absolutely plummet during the very severe lockdowns. And again, as scientists, we knew that link between vehicles and NO2, but that very unintended live experiment on vehicle numbers on our roads really showed definitively that link between the vehicle numbers on our roads and the impact for nitrogen dioxide. And it really, the options that are there regarding vehicles, the types of vehicles and the numbers of vehicles, and controlling that on our roads, and the choices that we make regarding that as citizens as well, can have a really big impact on NO2 in our urban centres.
And Pat, just to keep with you there for a moment as well, we have another question in. It's around the same thing you're saying. Look, because there's plenty of questions, a number of questions coming around the diesel, and I think you've talked a little bit about that. The other thing is about, how likely are these measurements taken over 1 month are representative of full annual average? And if you took it at a different time of year, or as other questions, if you took it pre-COVID as well, would you get different results, or what would it mean?
Again, we are conscious that this is only a snapshot, and it's also an indicative measurement, but it's a very robust indicative measurement, which is why it was chosen to use this particular technique. As regards, and I saw that question, as regards where we are with the COVID lockdowns, we weren't in a full lockdown during this particular period of time. It was also during the winter season when we tend to see more traffic on our roads, and it was picked during that time of year when we do see more traffic. Is there a potential that if we ran this again next year, or if we ran it in February, that we could see slightly higher values or slightly lower values? Yes, there is indeed, but it's generally reflective of the sort of a trend that we would see in the winter time. And I think equally this is really, really useful for what it's showing in the trend and that snapshot in time right across the city. And again, it very much is reinforcing the data that we've had from some tube studies that we've done, and we weren't able to put out 900 tubes around the city, and the modeling work that we've done, where it's showing that distribution, again, those more heavily trafficked areas where there are higher concentrations, and those areas such as in the quieter suburban areas, in the foothills of the Dublin mountain, when we get to those seaside locations, that we have much lower concentrations, that it's very much reflective, again, of what we've seen when we've done other work in this area. And that's another great strength from all of this data that's now available. And again, I just like to say thank you from my perspective, from the EPA's AIR unit, for giving us all this information that we can use to improve the models that we're looking to put out from Dublin, and ultimately, as you said yourself, Micheál, that forecast that we're working on that's going to look to predict air quality into the future for all of us.
Great, thanks, Pat. A question for Liam, actually, perhaps on this occasion. Just a couple of comments have come up around and saying, related to your air quality plan for Dublin, I suppose. And are you doing anything to reduce the amount of traffic in the Dublin area and in the Dublin city centre area, I suppose, where they kind of pointing out that, look, European cities have squares in some cases, but, we have busy streets. And is there any plans around trying to, I suppose, reduce that, a movement of traffic through the streets in the city centre area?
Thanks very much, Micheál, for the question. It's a good question, and it's a timely one for us because our new Dublin City development plan is out for public consultation, closed on the 14th of February, actually, the current round of public consultation. But Chapter 3 of that looks at climate change. And a big focus in that is about the 15-minute city, you know. That would be one of the key infrastructural development guidance documents that any local authority will produce. And essentially what it'll do is it'll guide infrastructural development going forward. And I think just in terms of the parks, you hit the nail on the head there in relation to that being a public infrastructure. I don't think it was considered that until COVID, you know, and then people started going into parks who hadn't been in parks in years. And there was nearly a safety valve for people, a mental health safety valve, as well as a lung for the city. We're of course blessed that we have Phoenix Park in Dublin, you know, and that was as busy as it ever was, I imagine, and the beaches were busy, and that shared public space became, I suppose, a unifying place in a difficult time for a lot of people, and the value that they represent to the city and to the citizens in the city, I think, is now ever more intrinsic to our spatial strategy for the city going forward. It's not just limited to that, of course. It's if you drive less, if you travel a shorter distance, you're less likely to use a car. So our active travel unit there would be very significant in terms of our infrastructure planning as well. And I suppose what this excellent study that An Taisce and the EPA have done is they've given us an evidence base on which we can justify some of the more ambitious decisions that we include in our plans and policies going forward. And we have that thankfully, because from the WHO have been ever increasingly able to link health outcomes to environmental conditions. So that debate is over. We can prove it. Because we can prove it, we can use it. And with the help and support of the public, it makes it much easier for us to bring in radical change. And the WHO limits, when they're introduced sometime after 2030, when that happens, we're going to have a radical change along the way. And we can't push people. We're actually finding we're being led by people and by the citizens in relation to this. It makes our job so much easier. Martin Fitzpatrick, Pat Kenny, the people here on this call who have been labouring at this for decades, they were in a niche industry for a very long time, and they got very little attention and support and recognition for the extraordinary work that they have done. Dublin City is the 4th cleanest capital in Europe, and Europe is the cleanest place in the world in terms of air quality. That didn't happen by accident. It requires much, much more now. But with the EPA, An Taisce, the department and our colleague local authorities, we're really making strides. We want patience, realistic expectations, all of those things, but we were never as well set up to make strides as we are now. And if anybody hasn't made a contribution in relation to that Dublin City Development Plan, I'd recommend that they have a read of Chapter 3 of that plan, of that draft that's currently in place. I think it'll answer a lot of questions for them.
Grant, thank you. Thank you, Liam. That was really, really helpful and really good to see kind of, you know, that on the plan as well. Just explain that. I think that, you know, where we're all thinking and that needs to go. I have other panelists I want to bring in as well, but there's a couple of questions come up on the health side of things that I think would be quite useful. And you have to forgive me, I'm trying to scroll through the questions and at the same time trying to pick them up and trying to remember them, and they're coming in fast and furious to it here. But I suppose, Tim, really a couple of things, you know, prolonged exposure for people with asthma or COPD, you know, what does that mean? And if you're in those areas that have a kind of an orange, you know, kind of range, you know, what does that mean for you in the long term? And then link to that, if you can, that's 2 questions, and link to that. A couple of times this come up, do home air purifiers make any difference, right? So, to you.
Well, prolonged exposure, well, there are short-term and long-term impacts from nitrogen dioxide, and the short-term impacts, you know, as Sabrina mentioned, can cause inflammation of the airways, and that can make conditions like asthma, particularly young children, worse, and also in older adults. And the longer the exposure goes on, the more that impact is going to tell in terms of the health status of people, particularly vulnerable people, children and older adults. But I think it's important, and this goes back to the other point that Sabrina raised. Nitrogen dioxide is a pollutant in itself that has a direct impact, but there are indirect impacts because it also is a key component in particulate matter. And we're much more concerned about particulate matter in terms of long-term health impacts. And they can cause a whole range of cardiac conditions, including enlargement of the heart, blocked arteries, and high blood pressure, and ultimately can cause mortality and fatalities due to heart attack and stroke. So they're the sort of longer term impacts of air pollution from transport, directly from nitrogen dioxide, but also indirectly from the particulates that can be caused by nitrogen dioxide, and then directly coming from transport pollution as well. In terms of air purifiers, I think that we tend to underestimate the impact of indoor air pollution on our health. And you mentioned the clean air strategy that has been launched by the government, and we welcome that, because part of that is a commitment to phasing out the burning of solid fuels. And smoky solid fuels are responsible for most of the particulates in outdoor air, but they're also responsible for a lot of particulates in indoor air. So rather than having an air purifier in your home, I think people should actually slow down or try and eliminate the burning of solid fuel in their homes, because solid fuel particulates coming out of your fireplace or a stove actually are a really big indoor air pollutant that can damage your health.
And thanks, Tim, for that. And actually, that allows me to segue into another couple of questions that have come through. And Sabrina, I'm going to bring it to yourself actually as well. It's about the results, and it's about saying, I suppose, in certain parts of the city like that, in the evening times, it's more around kind of smoky and dense kind of, I suppose, smog kind of issues that people have, which are more related to home heating and the way people heat their homes. And the other thing is, people who were maybe near large or major roads, they found that their levels are a little lower than they thought, but then sometimes they might have a big garden and so on. So there's a few things there. Why did we choose to measure NO2 and not PM, which is the particulate matter, which Tim just mentioned as well? And what does that affect, by the way, on NO2 when we're trying to measure its impact, and how does it kind of affect if you have gardens or you have buffer zones, and other people have talked about that as well,
Yeah, you're right. I mentioned that effect. I guess NO2 is an interesting pollutant. It does decrease quickly with distance. It's not the case with every pollutant, but as you move away from the source, which are the exhausts of cars, you're 5 meters away, 10 meters away, 20 meters away, the levels drop dramatically. So yes, it could be your garden, any buffer really between the main road and yourself makes a difference. Why NO2? Well, we would love to measure all the important pollutants in Ireland. And if we think of Dublin, really, NO2 is one. It's linked to traffic, and Tim mentioned particulate matter. It's generated by traffic, but in the winter, really, as you mentioned, the main source is the burning of solid fuels. We looked at different instruments that we could use to measure air pollution, and we have to remind ourselves, I guess, that we wanted to do something large scale, something that anyone could participate in. And what we found was we could find such instruments. So we used the tube. Most of you would know, have used it. And it was very straightforward to install. When it comes to PM, things are a bit more complicated. So it's not something we exclude in the future, but we will need more piloting to ensure that we can get a good return of results.
All right, thank you, Sabrina. Great, I'll keep going with the questions. They're coming in. I'm still trying to keep a track of them. Andy, a couple of ones for you. It's around the same thing. People are just asking kind of, are there other projects that they can get involved with maybe? How would they do that? Are we any more plans around this sort of thing? Are we going back to Dublin at any point? And one here as well, mapping the data we have and linking with the socioeconomic areas, and do we see different patterns emerging? We may not have done that, but any plans? So 2 or 3 questions there, Andy, for yourself.
Thanks, Michal. Well, as you say, where else can you get involved? Like there are many other citizen science projects being run, not only by ourselves, but by many of the third level institutes, and DCU would be one that I'd be thinking of, and there are others around the country. So there is opportunity to get involved in water monitoring in relation to biodiversity monitoring. EPA does support the National Biodiversity Data Centre for 2 projects looking at dragonflies, and it does also look at one called Know Your Shore. So those people who get close enough to Dublin Bay may be able to do some identification of marine species there. But as you say, there is enormous opportunity to expand and look at different things through citizen science and use citizen science to gather very valuable data. So I think we will, within EPA, looking at where we will move next. What are the parameters? Maybe we look at PM was already mentioned. So PM, particulate matter in air quality, is a particularly important one, and it's one that we may be able to look to monitor at larger particulate matter, and what's called PM10s, to move down to the ones that really impact very strongly on our health. The PM2.5s, they're much more difficult, as Sabrina was saying. We're looking at technologies that will allow us to do this on a mass scale. So there's lots of opportunity there to look at new projects that we can engage with. But we will be looking within EPA to kind of look at where we go next. And I think we will probably be coming back to these citizen scientists and others to ask them about how the EPA can support citizen science, and where we should be looking to do this as we look at producing a strategy for the EPA in this space. Again, there is lots of other players here, so it's always worth looking at that. And if we have any of these details, we'll put them back up on our Twitter and other places so citizen science can hear about them. You mentioned about the socioeconomic areas. There is a lot of research out there that shows, you know, that where you live and you know, your people who are to some level not as well advantaged as many of us may be, are more impacted by the impacts of pollution. It's a really strong link that's been shown again and again by socioeconomic research. So there really is a lot here. It's not only on air pollution, it's on noise, it's on other aspects of their environment. So there is opportunities in here for us to look at that. Absolutely, there is a lot of research that has been done, and again, EPA does have a very strong research program, and we are looking to see how we can bring citizen science into that research program, not to do the measurements, but to see where we should be moving within that space, and as part of the EPA's approach to citizen science. So our research program will be somewhere I'll be looking to see where can we expand this and how can we do this. And I'm sure they've got lots of good ideas. So if anybody's got good ideas, please feel free to send them on to us.
Yeah, and we definitely want to do more. I mean, it's been a really rewarding experience, hopefully for all of you, but actually all of us as well involved with this. It's just really encouraging to see people engaging the way they have. Sabrina, I'm going to go back to you. I'm going to high altitude to low altitude on this one. Okay, so it's good different questions to come in. Flight paths, right? And would we take any on flight paths? Would it make any difference? Right, and NO2. And the other thing is, people, you know, younger people or toddlers in prams, because they're lower to the ground, are they more affected or not? So high and low for you.
Yeah, to respond to your second question, I'm not an expert. I think Pat Kenny would be better placed, but I believe so. I believe, you know, the closer you're from the exhaust fumes, the more you'll be impacted. Also, children tend to breathe quicker than, you know, more often than adults. So they tend to inhale more air and more air pollution when air pollution is present. Sorry, I didn't completely understand the first question.
I think what the point, the question, a couple of times it come up, if you measured it under flight path, would it be higher of an aircraft?
Oh, right. Pat.
No, I think I'll give that to Pat as well. I mean, you know, I think the answer earlier on, it dissipates very quickly, but Pat, do you want to just...
It does, yes. I mean, it would be, it's man-made, it would be, yeah, traffic related, transport related. But Pat, please go ahead if you have
if you're talking about the aircraft being at altitude, and in that sense of a flight path, no, you shouldn't be more impacted. You shouldn't be more impacted by NO2 because the plane is flying over at several thousand meters up above. Like obviously we live in a dynamic airflow, because clearly that NO2, if it is coming out of that aircraft's engine, that's going to be converted into potentially other pollutants. all of which obviously the EPA measures from our fixed monitoring network, but from a nitrogen dioxide perspective, no.
Okay, thank you, Pat. Something just maybe a slightly provocative one, and maybe back to Martin for you, this one now. And someone saying, the results are okay, we don't have a problem, what are we worried about? How would you react to that?
Yeah, and again, the next question, and years where we were able to demonstrate that we were meeting legal standards. But what we see emerging, one of the great contributions the World Health Organization have made over recent years is the amount of time and effort they have invested in research. And so we're seeing their guidance values drop dramatically as we learn more about not just the impact of individual health impacts, but the range of health impacts. And that's one of the really interesting things that's starting to emerge in terms of air pollution. We always think in terms of cardiac health, in terms of respiratory health. We're now starting to see emerging evidence in terms of things like cognitive ability, in terms of more long-term health effects. So that's where we, as I said earlier, there's no room for any of these issues. There are gains that can be made, and we know that those incremental gains do lead to improved health. And I think just to come back to something Tim mentioned earlier, which I think is really important in terms of information for people who may have specific health issues. Just to mention, if you look at the air quality data on the EPA website or Dublin City Council website, we have the Air Quality and Health Index, which is really important, because what that does for individuals, it allows you to see the data, but also particularly for people who may have asthma, who may have issues, respiratory issues, the environmental data is given to you in a health context. And I think that's quite important in terms of having information, being able to make informed decisions around behavior and about potential health impacts.
Thanks, Martin. And you broke up a couple of times there, but I think we got all got that message. And it kind of links me, maybe Tim, just for you, and it can come up again. So, is there any safe level of, and it link, the safe level of pollutants in terms of impacting on health?
I think the short answer is no. And obviously, in an ideal world, you wouldn't have any of these pollutants in the air we breathe. But unfortunately, most of the activities we undertake as a society, generate a certain level of air pollution. And I think the emphasis, as everybody has mentioned, of the World Health Organization in terms of trying to bring the levels down is an effort to actually get the best possible air quality. So there are no safe levels, and particularly when you get to PM 2.5, it's not a particularly nice pollutant, and it's one of those pollutants that we would prefer to see getting down as close as possible to zero. And I think that certainly has been the emphasis of the WHO in terms of reducing the levels late last year.
Yeah, and thanks, Tim. And just on the 2.5s and PM 2.5 and PM 10, again, it's a couple of the questions, and maybe it's Pat, for yourself, kind of what can we do? Because I know we're moving away from NO2 now, right? but still, it's around air quality in Dublin. About stoves, are they good or are they bad? And what's more, how do we encourage people around changing their behaviours on burning solid fuels? Broad question. Sorry for throwing that at you.
No problem. It's about our choices and how we heat our homes. And some of us are in a position to make more choices than others. And in particular, I would say for those of us who may have what's called a secondary heating system, that may be the stove or the fire in your living room, and you might have an oil or a gas system. And again, I do appreciate energy prices are going up, so I do appreciate that, but we're talking here from an air quality perspective. If you have a way of heating your home from oil or gas or electricity or a renewable source that can make it warm and comfortable, but you have that secondary heating system that maybe you light on a Saturday evening or a Sunday night, or you light just to heat one room, again, particularly when we get into those times of the year when we have cold and still air masses, please just to consider that choice. particularly if it's not a choice that you're making to actually make your home warm, if it's purely a choice because you want to use that fire. And again, where we have those cold still air masses, and as Martin referred to the air quality index for health, if you're aware that the air quality index for health, and it's available, you can sign up to a Twitter feed from the EPA at EPA Air Quality, and it'll tweet twice a day to you the air quality index for health value, and it's on airquality.ie and on EPA.ie. And there's a Dublin City Council website as well that conveys all the data from the monitoring stations in Dublin. But if you're aware through that we're in an area, or we're in a time where the air quality is going to fair or poor or even very poor, certainly do consider those choices. The EPA has also developed an infographic that talks about how you heat your home. It goes through the types of heating systems, all the way through from the worst being an open solid fire to the very best being the renewable side of things. And it also talks through if you have to have, if for various reasons, be it the socioeconomic or others, that you have a solid fuel heating system, there are still choices that you can make there on the type of fuel that you're using for that system, how you service and maintain that particular system. That infographic is on the EPA website, www.epa.ie.
Yeah, and in simple terms, if you are going to burn fuel in a stove, make sure it's the most eco-friendly, dry wood and such like, and non, and not wet wood and not waste, and make sure you service your stove regularly. I've one last question. I'll have a few comments for myself and coming up. Sabrina, I'm going to give you the option because it's come up again around the other projects, and just to link this work with the citizen science work that you're also doing as well with us on the GLOW project, which is something similar with schools.
Sure. So I have colleagues at the Environmental Education Unit of An Taisce who work with schools, and they do measure. So there are over 100 something schools, 150 schools,
150, yeah.
and nationally who measure NO2 as well. And the way they do it, they measure NO2 at the school entrance, so really close to where traffic is passing. And then students also install tubes away from traffic. So usually they're given 3 tubes, and really what they're finding is similar to what we're finding tonight. They're really seeing that NO2 varies and decreases with distance from the source, from traffic. So yeah, the beauty of this project is that then there's a snapshot. That snapshot is national, and then all the students get this data, and they have a chance to do a research project with that. So we do that campaign twice a year. So if there's any teacher on the call, please do not hesitate to contact us at An Taisce, and we can bring that to your school.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sabrina, for that. And I'll wrap up now with the Q&A side, but I'm trying to get to most of the questions. I think we got really through a good fair number of them. Couple of things that came up. I was asked, just the question was it 14,000 premature deaths or 1,400? It was 1,400 premature deaths, and someone has given me there, Helena, thank you for a question about, and it links really around, air quality forecasting. So it actually comes back to a point I said earlier on, we'll talk, what will we do with your data? Now that you've produced this fantastic data, well, the air quality team, the EPA, has received European Union money, and we're putting our own money into it as well, to develop a major life project, is called, and part of that is to develop an air quality forecast for the data that you will have today that you've produced for us will be used to help us ground truth the forecast for the Dublin area, and that's really, really important. We hope to have it kind of start close to finishing maybe later this year, and then into the next year, maybe testing it out and releasing it. But that would give you a 3-day forecast is the intention. But your data, when you see that forecast, you will know that your data has been used to go in and help us make that forecast. So it's really, really good. And it is something that's already happening in Northern Ireland and other countries as well, but we don't have it here yet in Ireland. So that's just something, when we talk about citizen scientists, it's not just about us giving us data and then us walking saying, thanks very much, we handed it back, or we just look at it and think it's very nice. We really wanted to use your data, and we really wanted to make sure that you knew that you were using your data. Now, in terms of the poll, you went for a little poll earlier on. Sorry, we also have, just to mention as well, to keep looking at these data, these citizen science side of things, EPA's website has a citizen science page, and also if you want to follow this page, the air quality work that we're doing on the citizen science, air quality, Clean Air Together, cleanairtogether.ie. So the final results of the poll are, the question is, having had this experience of Clean Air Together project, what personal actions do you hope to do to reduce NO2 levels? And by and large, 53% of you, I think most of all of you said walk, cycle, or scoot more. And that is not fantastic. And I think Sabrina would say if you walk, cycle, and scoot more, then the levels outside the schools would also be lower as well. And Tim would also say to you, the last mile walk, the last mile walk, the last kilometer, in your journey is not just good for the air quality, it's good for your health as well. Other people, kind of 13% next was upgrade your car to a model with lower or zero emissions. And then 11% of people said they don't tend to make any particular change at this point in time. But maybe after hearing tonight, you might think a little bit more after this poll and after the discussions we've had, that there might be something that you can do very simply, just change one or two behaviors around taking a bus or walking. It's good for the environment and it's good for your health. Other people are saying walking from home more, another 10%, and sharing car journeys with others, that was at 3%. We obviously don't like sharing cars with other people. But using public transport more, an interesting one from Martin and Liam, that's another 10%. So it really, is really, really good. But by and large, walk, cycle, and scoot more is where we come to on this one, right? So thank you to the panelists. You're really, really good to answer all those questions. I tried to keep track of as much as I could. From my side, I mean, you've heard all those questions. I was going to try and summarize it, but actually there was such a wide variety of questions. But what I did get from yourselves was that, from the questions and from your involvement was the huge interest that you have in all of this, the interest not just in nitrogen dioxide and emissions from traffic, but where I live and what's affecting me and the health and why. It's the why is it affecting me? What can I do to do something different? I suppose like that again, as we can all make those personal choices to reduce air pollution, and we're hoping that you can really be the ambassadors now, having seen this and having seen what it means, and having people here talk to you about maybe the impacts around this. Can you get and encourage others to get involved to improve air quality, or to actually, as I said, get involved and get into that strategy for the clean air strategy, and may have your say as well and what should happen in Ireland. And it'll address some of those points that people are making as well. Should we ban this, or should we change that, or should we, how do we stop people burning, solid fuels and so on in different areas? So what's planned for the coming months, and that's come up as well. So in Q3, Q4 this year, the Clean Air Together strategy, or Clean Air Together citizen science program will be going to my hometown of Cork. So if you have people in Cork, by all means, let them know and let them sign up, and hopefully we'll have the same response that we've had here. I mentioned to you already about this LIFE project, so the results from this will be used by the EPA for a forecasting model all over the next number of months. And we'll also be developing, as Andy said, a new citizen science strategy. And I suppose we entered this arena a number of years ago, not knowing what to do. But I have to say, from a personal perspective, having seen the journey over the past while, I just think the involvement, the interest of 2,500 people and the involvement of 1,000 of you directly in something as an initiative like this has been really encouraging, and has emboldened us to do a lot more. And we'll be a lot more ambitious about what we can do and how we can involve people. So just before I wrap up, it's a really, really big thanks to all of you who are involved to make such a success. The recording of the webinar will be available shortly on the YouTube channel, and a special thanks to all of you on the call for giving your time this evening. You come home from a hard day's work, or you come home and you have your homework still to do from school and so on. You still have to do it, by the way. Then you've given that time up to us, and we're very, very grateful. So I hope you found this interesting, and I hope you found it informative, and thank you again from the bottom of our hearts around this. Yeah.